let's get going. Right. So to start things off, we're going to basically follow the same format as last week. Hang on, I just quickly need to check, make sure everything, yeah, that seems to be working. Yeah, so we're going to follow the same format as every week now. It's going to be going over every single map. So last week we did Mirage. I didn't upload that YouTube video or that live stream to YouTube because I think that it can definitely be improved, and in the future I will be going over Mirage as my first map when I do an official YouTube series on Mirage. So this VOD will probably be uploaded if anyone wants to look back at it, but the Mirage one from last week will not be getting uploaded. So, Overpass. We're going to follow the same format as last week, so we're going to first do an overview. I'm going to talk about how to zone and where we can use zoning at the start, so that we can have a look at basically how we can use zoning from what we learned in the first lesson. Then we're going to talk over map control and why it's important on Overpass, and then we're going to go over some very simple CT setups with map control, and we're going to go over some T setups in the defaults side. We're also going to talk a little bit on T setups when we talk over the map control, and hopefully this should clear up a lot of questions for Overpass on how you can play differently and how you can maybe look at approaching the map a little bit different. So I'm going to move this. In fact, I'll keep this here. So the first thing that basically we want to talk about is Overpass as a map. So Overpass in general is a very, very fun map. It's a very team-orientated map. It's a very difficult map if you want to play it on your own. So it's definitely recommended that if you are going to play Overpass, you need at least another player to play it with, because if you're doing anything like on the CT side, you're doing any form of map control, if you haven't got coordination between you and your teammates, then it can go very wrong. And on the T side, pushing forward in Overpass usually requires good utility usage, so it's definitely worth having other players to play with if you're playing matchmaking or face it. And if you're a team, then it's definitely use your team at all times. So first thing, primary entrances. We talked about this on Mirage last week, in the fact that Mirage is a map where there's 6 entrances into the CT half of the map. So what that meant was on Mirage, because there's 6 entrances, there's only 5 players. You had to always be on your watch. There's always one position that can be open, and there's always a hole in the defense, which means you had to go aggressive. Now Overpass is a little bit different, in which it has 2 types of defense. A little bit different to a Mirage in that there's a passive defense and there's a more aggressive offense, not necessarily map control, but just there's a larger CT side area and there's a smaller CT side area. So what I mean by this, the first thing I've got here is basically the primary entrances. There's 4 main entrances which go into the site. So if we look at the map, we can see here we've got this area towards A. We have right here we've got one main entrance coming from the short or banana area, and there's one main entrance coming from long, which means with 2 players you can easily cover, if you play passive on A, those 2 entrances, no problem at all. And if we look at towards the B site, we see the exact same thing. So if we're playing completely passive on B, not going for any form of aggression, we only really need 2 players in order to watch both short and long monster at the same time. So what that means is, the first main point for Overpass is that with a passive hold, you only need 4 players maximum to cover all 4 entrances. However, when you are playing passive and you are playing like this, if the enemy are able to easily gain map control from this, for one, and then they can abuse it. So obviously when you've got these very, very passive holds from the CT side, if the enemies get into, for example, short control or banana control, they can do things like easy executes. They can use utility to do easy damage on the B players, because you can very, very easily see over the top of the wall here where the boost spots are. You can throw grenades. You can find out where the players are playing on B by doing things like bait and switch Molotovs and whatnot, which I'll show you some examples of later. So playing passive like this, yes, you can watch all the angles, and with 5 players you definitely have everything on lockdown. However, it's very easily abusable. So That's the main part of Overpass. The primary entrances is only 4, which is a big change from Mirage. Now, if we look at the secondary entrances, now what this means is if you're a counter-terrorist, you can push more into the map, and you can have more CT control of the sort of general area of the map. There's 7 areas which you have to look at. So I've marked these in green. So, for example, if you have long as a CT, you need to be aware that there's an entrance here. If you have toilets and short, you have 3 entrances here. So you have upper connector towards fountain and party, and then if you're towards the short area, you have connector and the short tunnel, and if you're towards monster or sort of the long area towards B, then you have this area towards monster. So what that means is with 5 players, unless you have all eyes all over all at the same time, you're not going to be able to cover all of these positions. Now you can play, for example, let's say you have one player which sits right here. What I'll do is I'll quickly put a counter-terrorist here. So if you have a counter-terrorist, for example, sitting in this position right here, he could, in theory, look down this way and he could technically cover all 3 areas. However, if you're doing that as a counter-terrorist, you're easily going to be picked off. They can peek from 3 different areas. They can use flashbangs very easily to get past this position, which is why Overpass is a map where you have to very, very carefully pick where you get your map control. And if you're going for map control somewhere, then there's going to be a weakness somewhere else. So it's a map of deciding if we are going to go aggressive, somewhere is going to be very weak. Now, if we compare this to Mirage, which we talked about last week, when you decide, I want to go aggressive here, for example, I want to go aggressive B apps, that doesn't necessarily mean that somewhere else is particularly weaker. Whereas on Overpass, if let's say I want to take long aggression, then typically you're going to do it with either 1 or 2 players, and this is going to leave other parts of the map very vulnerable. For example, mid can be a lot more vulnerable from this position. It's very easy as a terrorist to see where the aggression is happening from the CT side, and therefore change your direction for the round and easily take the round win on aggressing CTs. So now that we've got that out of the way, we have these primary positions, 4 of them, very, very easy. You can cover all positions really well passively, however, very easily abusable. And map control for the CT side is very difficult because you have to choose and pick whereabouts you go for your map control and then how that's going to weaken somewhere else on the map. So moving on, we're going to have a look at quickly the general T-side setups. I believe that there's 2 main setups, and we'll look at the general CT side setups. So again, I believe there's 2. So we'll start with the T side because this is, in my opinion, the easier side to sort of pick when it comes to picking standard setups. And I would say the general T-side setup is sort of a 3-1-1 and a 2-2-1. So what I mean by this, if we reset this map right here. So typically you'll have 3 players towards the playground, 1 player towards connector, and 1 player towards the B area. Now this is a very standard setup, and the reason why is because it allows a lot of options. Now we'll focus right now on this B player. So let's say the one guy who goes B. Now he can do many things. So for example, he could push into B on his own. He could push into short on his own. He can assist connector after taking short, so he could go into connector. He can assist anyone coming out of connector with, for example, pop flashes which go over the top. As for a quick example, he could go for short peeks early in the round. He can peek any players doing a boost spot from an early spawn. He can hold passive either here or, for example, up here or all the way back, so easily rotatable. So just with 1 player B, you have all of these options, which is why having 1 player B is pretty standard in a default. And then obviously 1 player connector, which again we'll list a couple of things that he can do. So obviously he can go short either on his own or with the assist of the B guy helping him. He can come up towards connector. He can easily come up towards connector, towards the A guys, either with flash assists or Molotov assist, for example. There's lots and lots of things that you can do with this small entry zone right here, as we mentioned in lesson 2 on entry zones. The connector guy can use those really well. He can hold passive and cut off rotations late game. You can obviously hold passive and be a rotating player, so you can easily from connector rotate towards A and towards B. So there's lots of options for one guy connector. Doesn't necessarily have to be just a hold. It can also be very aggressive at the same time. So there's your 1 and your 1. They can be both a passive and aggressive, and they can easily do things on their own, which is why this makes a really good standard setup. And 3 up top. Now, the reason why this is quite standard, 3 up top towards A instead of 3 towards B, is because of your options. And when you're 3 up top, you can attack anywhere on the map and potentially all at the map at exactly the same time. So if you want to go long, you can go long with 3 players. If you want to go mid, you can easily go mid with 3 players. If you want to pinch mid with the connector player, for example, it's very, very easy to pinch mid with the connector player. My mouse has died, which is very, very professional. Give me 1 second. That's the benefits of having a wireless mouse. As I was saying, so you could easily pinch mid with the use of connector. You can also have the short guy come up through connector and pinch mid late round. You can attack both long and short at the same time. There's lots and lots of options. You can also leave, for example, you could leave a teammate behind, so you can have 1 here and 2 here, potentially holding mid and 2 going long. And if needed, this player can easily rotate. 3 players from up can easily rotate down, no problems at all. So this default is very, very standard across the board. There's many, many things you can do. It doesn't have to be 3 going up, those guys going aggressive, and the guy down at B and the guy in connector doing absolutely nothing. So that's why it's a very, very standard. You'll see this quite a lot on the general T-side setups of teams. This is quite normal. And the alteration to this is obviously 2-2-1, which has all of the exact same benefits, where your guy B can go aggressive or he can hold. He can do that both short and monster, for example. Your guy's connector can both go aggressive together if they want. They can both play passive together. You can get an easy double rotate towards B quickly. You can have 2 people burst out of connector into short, 2 people burst up onto A from connector through mid with either using the entry zones with Molotovs, flashbangs, grenades, whatever it is. And you can double attack long and short at the same time with 4 people, no problem at all. So this is why those 2 variations of the default are very, very standard. So moving on to the general CT side setup, you basically get the exact opposite of that, in the sense that instead of more players playing towards the A side of the map, you typically get more players playing towards the B side of the map, which is usually quite ironic, because you would think with the default being more guys usually towards A for the Ts, then usually you would have more players towards A for the CTs. But the reason why this isn't the case on Overpass is because of the rotation. The rotation on Overpass is incredibly short, one of the shortest across any maps. If you have a guy, for example, in Heaven, which I can quickly demonstrate in-game. If you have a guy, for example, in Heaven, you can easily get from Heaven up towards A in just about 5 to 10 seconds between that sort of time. If you have a guy, let's say, towards jungle, again, you can easily rotate up towards the stairs within 5 to 10 seconds. So Overpass is a map where you very, very quickly can rotate, and the B side of the map typically is weaker because it's very easily executable, and you want more of your players towards B. So looking at the CT side setups, 2-on-2, this is very standard. Now what that means is, it doesn't necessarily mean someone playing mid, but rather someone playing rotate. So that means you have a dedicated rotate. So you'll have 2 towards A, 1 towards either Heaven or jungle, and 2 towards B. So that's a very standard setup. With this, you can easily go aggressive on all parts of the map. For example, you can aggress long, you can aggress fountain, you can aggress connector, you can aggress monster, and you can aggress short. All of these areas are easily aggressible with this setup. It just means that because you're not concentrating more of your firepower towards any particular area, you have less ability to create success than you would if you were, for example, to go 3A and just 2B, and then you could attack more confidently in these areas, or 3B and have your rotator player obviously towards B, and then you would have more confident going into these areas. You can get better flashbangs, better pop flashes, better entry zone usage, etc., etc. But this is the most standard setup for the the CT side. And you'll see that when we talk over the map control and the CT setups for map control, 2-on-2 is in every single setup because it's just very, very good for everything. It's a very good multitasking. If you need something to fall back on, 2-on-2 is basically going to set you up. If you're playing Face It or anything and you want a very stable setup, if you find there's weaknesses in the defenses, just look for a 2-on-2 and you should be sound. So, and the final setup is obviously 2-3. Now what that means is instead of this player playing more towards jungle or heaven, you have him playing more onto the B site, though this can typically result in aggressive short or a very aggressive monster hold. For example, you usually see bait and switches where you would have, let's say, one player here and one player here. Let's change it to the CT. You would have one player here, for example, and as soon as this player takes contact with any people going past this entry zone right here, then this guy could swing and get the kills. Very, very easy. And then obviously you'd have your second player potentially set up on top of here, or maybe in this corner right here, or right here, watching towards short, or even barrels watching towards short. So that's your other setup, is basically 2 towards A and 3 aggressive or more on the side towards B. So they're your setups. Very, very simple. So what we've covered there is your basic setups, your primary entrances, your secondary entrances, and that will take us very steadily on towards zoning. So if anyone has any questions about anything that I've talked about, feel free to shoot away, but we should be sound to carry on. So we're going to talk about zoning now. Now, if you're not familiar what zoning is, I'm going to explain again. I explain every week, but if you want an in-depth review of what zoning is, you can go watch my video from a couple weeks ago called Zoning. It's going to explain the whole concept and what it means. But the general idea is there's 2 zones on a map. There's primary zones and there's secondary zones. So what I mean by this is primary zones are areas in which you can easily retake a site. So on Overpass, for example, if you're coming from B towards A, then if you have stairs control or you have bank control, you're very easily able to throw utility from these areas and retake A. Now, if you're rotating from A towards B, if you have, for example, heaven control and jungle control, full jungle control, not just partial, then you, again, are very, very easily able to throw Molotovs, throw smokes, and these are basically primary zones, any areas in which you can retake the site well. And secondary zones are anywhere where you're cutting off map rotation. So where an enemy's rotating from one area to the next, that's where your secondary zones are. So we're going to talk very simply about CT side zones and keeping hold of them. So on the A site, there's 4 main zones. You have stairs, you have bank, you have long, and you have short. Now, short doesn't necessarily have to be this area right here, but rather this area in this box. Now, the reason why this area is more important than this area squiggled in blue is because from this point right here, you can throw a lot more smokes, you can throw better pop flashes, you can throw Molotovs, and everything from this area fairly safe. So if as a CT you have control of this area right here, you're going to be able to throw utility quite safe. So this is a priority over this little area right here. And towards the B site, we're looking at another 4 primary zones. So you've got heaven control, you have jungle control, you have short water control, and you have towards monster, so the water on B. If you have any of these zones, again, you can easily retake the site. If you have heaven, you can throw easy smokes to block off short, Molotovs to block off anyone playing monster. You can pop flash out for any people coming out jungle, etc., etc. So what my general rule for Overpass is if you're a terrorist, you typically want 2 out of 4 of the primary zones. So if I'm attacking A, then I need to decide, okay, where's the map control, where's the, where are the enemies rotating from, and where would be really important for me to take. So for example, if you hear as you're entering A site that all the enemies are balling up towards stairs, then obviously it's not going to be very wise to take stairs. However, you could, for example, molly into the corner to stop them being able to get up the staircase, and then you might be able to take stairs control. So I can give a quick example of this in game. So let's say, for example, I'm a terrorist, I'm taking A site. We have site control now. We've taken control of the site. We're getting the bomb down. And I noticed that I hear lots and lots of steps coming up from B. Then it would be in my interest to molly off, for example, the stairs. Now, if I molly deep stairs like this, it's going to be very easy for me to take stairs control. So what that means is, as an attacking terrorist, I might not want to smoke right here, because I might want to take stairs control, which would essentially be one of the 4 zones, and it would make it very, very difficult for any players rotating B in order to retake the A site, because they have one massive area which is going to be very important for them. Now the same works for bank. Exactly the same sort of system. If you're attacking the A site, then taking bank would obviously be very detrimental towards the rotating players from B. They would basically have to go mid. When you have bank control, you can watch both bank and the staircase at the same time. So it can be very, very wise to take bank control. And if you can't take it, again, we can use a very, very similar thing which we did last time. If you come in the game, if you're attacking the B site and you don't want to take stairs control and you can't take bank control, for example, you could molly in deep. Now molly in deep will basically cut off any players able to go up the bank area or up into bank and basically do any rotate utility. So even though you might not take them, weakening the ability of the primary zones is also a very, very big factor that you need to look at. But in general, 2 out of 4 is what you need. So typically when you attack the A site, you already have short control, very easy to keep onto. When you take the A site, leave one player behind, he can easily keep hold of short. Long control, again, when you take the site, it's very easy to go back and take long. So you basically already got your 2 out of 4. However, taking bank and short, and the stairs here is it's an option which is going to cripple the ability for the rotating B players to perform any form of retake. So I would definitely look into the 2 out of 4 that you take being at least one of these, if not both of these, bank and stairs. So that's the A side covered. I think it's very important. 2 out of 4 is a must. If you only have one, let's say short, then the only way that this is going to be very easily viable is if you have the bomb plant on this X right here. If you only have long, again, it's going to be very difficult. They'll be able to know you're not short. Long's going to be very difficult. They could smoke off this area right here, and you've basically stopped any form of being able to hold your bomb plant. So moving on to B site. Now it's the exact same system. 2 of the primary zones are really good to have, and 2 of them are just mediocre. So the same as A, where short and long were mediocre. We're looking at short waters and monster waters are very weak. However, heaven control and jungle control very, very strong. So what I would say is 2 out of 4 again. So we're looking at 2 out of 4 of these zones is what you want. Now, the ones which you're probably going to have as an attacking terrorist are you're probably going to have short. That's usually a given. And if you have the site control, there typically won't be very many players monster, if any. So these 2 you already have most of the time. So the 2 out of 4 is already covered. However, jungle control, incredibly important. If you have this, they have to filter themselves out heaven. And if they filter themselves out heaven, then they have a massive falling animation in which their accuracy is going to be nil. And you can very, very easily filter them into players which are sat underneath, or very simple crossfires from, for example, short and jungle, for example, is an easy crossfire that you could do. Or there's lots and lots of crossfires which you could filter the enemy players into when they don't have access to jungle. And if you take, obviously, control of heaven, then if they do filter themselves out jungle, they're going to have to be aware of too many angles. So they're going to have to be looking forward, they're going to have to be looking up, they're going to be having to look towards short water, they're going to have to look in this little cubby right here, and they're going to have to look in this cubby right here. So taking 1 out of those 2 very, very strong positions right here, heaven or jungle, is much more suitable than keeping hold of short and monster. So that's what I'll say about primary zones. So the 4 which are very important to me are jungle and heaven on the B site, and staircase and bank for A. Now as I said, I'll quickly go in game and I'll show you if you can't gain access to them, then how do we weaken those ability. So you usually do it with Molotovs, you can also do it with smokes. So if we're looking at A site, if you're attacking A site and you have a Molotov, then it would be in your interest to throw a Molotov, for example, towards a staircase. This is going to mean that any rotating players are going to find it very hard to get up. They're going to have to use a smoke if they want to, or they're going to have to wait, which means your site access is going to be very simple. You're not going to have to worry too much about rotating players. Now, again, for bank, if you can't take bank control, you feel like there's already players in there, then you can, for example, molly deep into bank. Now, again, this is going to have the exact same effect. If any players are rotating up here, they're going to have to either wait behind the Molotov or jump through it and take lots of damage, or they're going to have to filter themselves through the staircase, which is going to be much easier if the enemies come at large through one particular choke point. It's going to be better for you. Now, the B site, again, same thing. You could potentially molly over the top. That's a bad molly. You could molly into this cubby here, for example. There's lots of ways you can do it. If you're coming up monster, you can molly over the top, for example. If you're in short, if you have a player left back on short, as you enter the B site, you could, for example, throw a Molotov over the top of the boost spot right here, which is going to go really deep in. You could have a player somewhat go aggressive and just molly deep in here, and you can also smoke this off. So instead of using mollies, you could, for example, smoke off right here. You can do the exact same from short. You can throw a smoke in from up here. You can, if you're going monster, do the exact same thing. So throwing a smoke off this area right here is going to allow it to bounce around this this particular point. And the same for heaven. So it's very, very similar. You can throw a molly from here. If you're coming out from monster, you can throw it very deep. So the goal is being deep, because what that's going to do is, if players want to, for example, come up this staircase right here, they're not going to be able to. If they're coming down from bank, then they're only going to be able to get to a certain point. If you throw a molly which lands here, they're only going to be able to get to this staircase, which, unless they have an orb, they're not going to be very useful. So throwing deep mollies into these primary zones is going to be much more helpful if you can't take it, than just completely leaving it and not doing anything. So definitely looking at pushing people back away from the primary zones is definitely a must for a map like Overpass. It's going to allow you very, very simple access to the site, and you're not going to have to worry particularly about rotating players. So keeping hold of your primary zones is the main thing we wanted to talk about here. So how do you do it? So let's say you're playing aggressive on, you're playing on site, and a full execute comes towards A. Let's say they smoke. Here, for example. They might even smoke bank. This is a very, very basic one that you see quite a lot. And you're alone on site, let's say. So you could fight and you could potentially win. However, if you're in a prac, or you want to sort of experience how it is to keep hold of a primary zone and retake the site, then what I would say is, instead of sitting on the site and waiting either potentially to die or to make the hero play, you could, for example, leave the site completely and just play back from here. Now, what this is going to allow you to do, if they, for example, go for a plant, you can easily nade the plant off. You can molly the plant off. If they want to go aggressive on truck, you can molly the truck very, very easily. You can nade the truck from here. There's lots of stuff that you can do from back here, which is going to hinder the ability of the opponents attacking. So what I would say is, if you want to retain your primary zones very easily, then leave the site completely. And this doesn't just apply for stairs, this applies for everywhere. So for example, if you're playing, let's say you see AWPers doing this in the pro scene, they'll be doing jump peeks and whatnot here, and let's say a full execute comes over, you could take a first peek, maybe take a first shot, and then go towards bank. If you sit maybe towards bank, yeah, they could molly it, but at least you have bank control. As long as they don't molly behind and in front of you, you should be pretty safe here. They could double nade you, for example, but not very many teams have late nades on the T side, so holding bank would be very, very good. Another option is obviously going towards long. If you're on the site, and again, you see another execute, or you think they're about to execute A, then as I said, the enemies want to take 2 from you, so you need to limit them from taking 2 from you. So what you might want to do is, instead of playing here and trying to fight, go long. And just hold long. For example, you could hold here, or you could potentially hold back further back from here and just wait to make sure that no players come. As they're taking the site, you just make sure you hold your ground here, and then obviously for the late game, for the retake, you have the ability to pop flash your teammates. You can make sure that no players are stuck on this wall, for example, or anyone sat on the squad bank. You can molly truck from here. There's lots of stuff you can do if you keep hold of your primary zone. So very, very important. Keep hold of your primary zones if you can. 2 out of 4 is what you want. Aim for 2 out of 4. Now we'll talk about secondary zones quickly. We've basically talked about the primary zones for the T side, so let's talk over secondary zones now. So secondary zones are very simple for Overpass. You have connector, the whole connector area right here. You have the A rotate through the CC spawn, and you have the T rotate through the T spawn. So these are your 3 secondary zones. In order for you, for example, if you're a terrorist and you want to go towards B, you either go through connector or you go through CT spawn. If you're a counter-terrorist and you want to go towards B from A, then obviously you go either through connector or you go through CT. Very, very simple. There's no real mid. The mid is the connector, so the biggest secondary zone here which you need to be aware of is connector. So how can we be aware of this? So being aware of secondary zones is quite simple. Typically, you're not going to have a player in... If they're in connector, they're not going to be sat here. They're typically not going to be sat here. The most common position is either here or, for example, here. So this position usually isn't here. These are your 2 main positions. If you're rotating from A towards B, you need to be aware of this player right here, and you need to be aware of this player right here. So the way you can be aware of this player, you could obviously come straight through connector and try and fight him, or you can use your teammates, for example. You can throw a self flash from inside connector out the little window. You could have a guy who's already towards the B jungle, throw a flash over, or potentially throw a nade here, or even throw a Molotov here. So you can use players which are in jungle to assist you coming out of connector. And obviously if the player's here, again, being aware. So if you're rotating, let's say through A, instead of just coming straight down and just going straight towards a B site because you believe that they've done a full B execute and that's where you have to be right now, just before you go through the door and you start making your way towards B, make sure you check connector. If you check and there's nothing there, that can be good. However, what if the player was hiding? Now you go towards short control and this player sneaks out. And as you're about to start throwing utility from short, he comes behind you and instantly kills you. Well, then you've lost out. So the 2 or 3 seconds it would have taken to go check the back of connector, if you had the time, you've now lost because you potentially just lost the round from dying. So what I would say is, if you're coming connector, you see you have time, maybe they don't have a bomb plant or they just got the bomb plant right now. If you're just on your own or you're with a second player, go check connector. Make sure connector's clear. The reason why, as I said, is the time lost in which you've checked connector and made sure that there's no player there is probably between 3 and 5 seconds. And in doing so, you've secured the ability to know that if there is a guy holding a secondary zone, he's probably going to be here, here, potentially here or here. Those or even short. So you've limited the ability of the players being able to hold the secondary zone and sneak up behind you. That's something you really need to be aware of when you're rotating from A to B and vice versa. If you're rotating from B to A, not just coming straight into here and going for it. You've got to be aware that there could be a player here. So for example, you can have a short player flash you through this little window right here and open the door exactly the same time and start challenging. If you come straight in here and you see that there's no one end of connector and they've just started taking A, then be aware. If end of connector wasn't clear and you even went and checked it and there was no one there, where could the next secondary zones be? So they could have a player here, for example. They could have a player here. They could have a player here. They could have a player here. Still watching connector, but not directly inside of connector. So these are things you need to be aware of. When you come out, you don't want to just put all of your attention here and then here. You need to be aware that there could be players here holding the secondary zone, again here, and potentially around this corner. Anywhere that is watching the exit to this, there could be enemy players. And that's what you need to be aware of when you're rotating from A to B or B to A, is that the primary zone, the secondary zone itself is connector, but they could potentially be watching either from this doorway or this entrance right here. And when you're a terrorist, you need to be aware of those are options. So instead of just sitting in connector and waiting for the primary zone, waiting for the enemies to rotate through that secondary zone, you could come here, for example, and wait. and as your teammates are executing the B site, and you hear the A rotating players starting to go towards B, you could peek out and easily get 2 kills in from behind. So these are some things that you need to keep your options open when you're holding secondary zones. That you need to think, where could the enemies be, and how do I not get killed by that? So that's how you be aware of your secondary zones. Basically, connector is your main one. You can obviously add in CT and T. So obviously when rotating through T, it's the same thing. You need to be aware of players here, players potentially hiding here. If they're hiding here and you run past as a rotating CT player, and you just look, there's no one there, and keep running, then as you keep running, if there was a player here, you could easily peek out and get killed. So these are some little things you need to be aware of. When you are rotating through those spawns, if somehow, by magic, a terrorist managed to get into this position right here, and you're rotating from A site to B site, then you have to be aware there could potentially be a player here. It's very, very rare that that'll happen. It's more likely that they're going to be in T-spawn. However, still something you have to be aware of. Don't just aimlessly run through your secondary zones. So, use of zoning. Pretty simple. All covered. I hope everyone understood. Obviously, it's a little bit of a more complicated topic. However, very, very important when you're thinking about rotating through your secondary zones, and obviously when you're looking at primary zones, what's required. As I said, the 2 out of 3 rule is typically what I'll use. Now let's talk about map control. Obviously, we can very quickly jump through this. So we can line up a hopefully side by side here. So that did not work the way I wanted it to. Right. So CT map control. So when you're looking at map control as a counter-terrorist, obviously we're looking at short. We're looking at short water. We're looking at monster. We're looking at connector, fountain, and long. So one thing you need to be aware of is, as I said, if we look back at the beginning, there's 7 entrances that you need to be aware of. So how can you reduce that number when you're playing sort of the mid game? The middle of the maps. So to reduce that number down from 7 to less, let's say you take fountain control. So where there was 3 entrances here. It's here, here, and here. Now, and potentially here. So 4 entrances. Well, you taking fountain control and potentially going aggressive up to this point right here, you've reduced these 4 numbers down to 1. So now with 2 players aggressive here, for example, you can have 1 watching this entrance and you can have 2 on B. So we're back on our 2-1-2. And you've easily, from this point, you're easily able to watch all the positions. Which is why Overpass is a map where you should, or you can go aggressive, but you have to be aware, okay, what is the problem now? So if you go aggressive fountain with 2, you don't have a second person towards A, a third person towards A, and you have him instead either heaven or jungle. Now connector's weak, and they can easily go towards A. So this is a map where if you are doing aggression, okay, now where is weak and how do we strengthen that? That's what you have to be aware of. And when you're on the terrorist side, you need to think the exact opposite of that. Let's say you start the round and they all of a sudden start doing aggression towards fountain. Okay, where's weak now? Could they be 4 players towards A? Have they taken connector control? If they're taking both fountain and connector aggressively, they could potentially only have 1 player on B. And this is what you need to be thinking on. You need to be thinking quickly on your feet. Where are the enemies aggressing on Overpass? And where's the weakness? Because there's always a weakness when there's aggression on Overpass. Typically, with this 2-on-2 setup, you can reduce that weakness really, really far down. However, let's say you do go 2-on-2. Where's the weakness? Well, it's with this guy, the 1. That's where the weakness is. That's where you would fight with your players. So 2-on-2 is the best setup for covering everything when you're doing aggression or you're going passive. However, it can still have strong weaknesses. So T-map control. So we're looking at short water again. We're looking at B short. So this area right here. Connector control. Toilets. So basically all of this area right here. And long. So we'll say up to about this area right here. So if you have any of this sort of control on the T side, you're typically going to be in a powerful position. If you've taken toilets control, for example, they don't have short. It's going to be also, they might not have long, because in order to have toilets, they're typically not going to be able to play positions like up aggressive long here, which means if they are playing long, they're only really going to be here, or they'll be very, very passive towards the signpost here. So when you're looking at team map control, if you have any of those positions, you're typically in a good position of power, because it means they either aren't going aggressive, or you've taken a part of the map off them, which is going to make their aggression quite weak. So if the enemy take X, you should try and take Y. As I said, if they take Fountain, then try and take Connector, or try and take B short, or try and take Monster. Because if they take Fountain and you take one of those, they're going to have to quickly back away from Fountain, or they're going to have to rotate this way towards B, or they're going to have to either come behind in Connector, or they're going to have to try and fight Connector from Fountain itself, which is going to cause many, many weaknesses. And that's why I typically say, read the opponent very well. If they're doing aggression, there's somewhere that's weak. So they're your main map control for CT and T side. Now let's have a look at some setups for map control. Setups for map control. So as I said, 2-on-2 is the standard. You'll see this in every single one of these, because 2-on-2 is very, very easy to do. As I said, if you're playing the team game, that's typically your default on the CT side. If you're playing a face-up and 2 players go A and 2 players decide they go in B, just be the rotator. That way it's pretty safe. 2-on-2, you're typically going to do quite well. So 3-2. So we're looking at 3 towards. Can I make this larger? I can make this larger. So apologies for not having this larger before. So 3 towards A, 2 towards B. Now that means you've not got a rotator, but more your 3 aggressive towards A and 2 very sort of holding at least this angle and this angle. You could potentially have both the B players on a retake, for example, here. Now this is very good because it's going to allow long control very easily. With 3 and 2, you're easily able to get long control, as you can see here. You can also highlight all of these so that they're all the same color. So we'll just go for sort of light green. So as you can see, with a 3-2 setup, you're able to have connector, playground, and long all as very easy setups. So with one quite simple setup, you can have all of those things. So you can have easy long control. Let's say you want to take long, you could do it with 2 or 3 players. That means mid could be weak if you do it with 3, but if you do it with 2, then you could obviously leave a guy behind. You can also do it with 1. You can take long control with 1. You can have, for example, 2 players aggressive towards this area right here, towards playground, and they could throw flashbangs over, which land in this position. They could throw Molotovs into this area right here, in towards playground. They can throw flashbangs towards playground. They can smoke aggressively here, which means your long player hasn't got as much pressure on him. So long control, very, very easy with 3 towards A. Playground, the exact same. So taking playground control, or playground and fountain, very, very easy when you've got 3 players. The only thing is, if you go fully aggressive with 3 players, as we said before, then you typically are going to be quite weak towards connector. And connector control. So connector control, obviously a very important thing on Overpass. Never not abuse connector. Always be looking, can we take connector this round? Because it's just, you have your secondary zone. Late game, they're going to struggle to rotate. So very, very good position to take. But with obviously your 3 towards A, 2 towards B, you can go aggressive connector either with all 3 players, but then you have to be aware long's open, or mid's very weak. Or you can have 2 players inside, 1 watching from the outside, 1 player inside, 2 watching from the outside, and you can also have a 1-1-1 setup right here. So you can have all 3 players towards A, all sort of watching one area at a time. So that's why 3-2 is quite good. And obviously, so if you want playground control, we can also look at a 4-1. So 4 towards A, 1 towards B. Now what I would say is, if you're going to do this setup, keep the guy towards B on a primary zone. So let's say they start doing a B execute and you're playing passive. I would either try to hold this position right here or heaven. Now if you do that, again, going to make it very difficult for them. You could save your smoke, for example, and if you're playing, let's say, this position right here, and they try and molly you off, you could just throw a smoke right here, which lands. And as long as you have control of this jungle area, going to make it very difficult for the enemies to hold the B site when you have all of your players come back around, take heaven control, they can easily take jungle control, and that's it. You can do all of the retake utility. Very, very simple. So, if you're using a 4-1 setup, I would say, keep the B player on a retake. Doesn't have to be. You can go for the hero play, try to take a 1v5. But typically holding on to one of those primary zones is going to be a recommendation here. And with a 4-1, incredibly easy to take connector control, incredibly easy to take playground. Playground's the big one here. You can go 2-2 aggressive, you can go 3-1 aggressive, you can go all 4 players through long, all 4 players through mid. Very, very easy to take playground control. Moving on, connector, 2-3. So flip it around. Instead of 3 towards A, you can have 3 towards B. That means you can easily take, what do you call it? Sorry, not short. You can easily take connector with both players, and you can have all 3 players sort of playing towards B. You could potentially put one of them as a rotator in connector, but then that would just be a 2-on-2. But what that means is you can go aggressive in connector and aggressive towards B in such a setup, or more players, as I said, playing crossfires on B, for example, more aggressive. And if they do take A, then you have this primary zone very easily obtainable. You can take this primary zone again, and you can take this primary zone again. And if we look back to what I said, if they only have 1 out of 4 of those positions, it's going to be very difficult for them. If they only have long and you have 2 guys aggressive in connector and 3 guys playing on B site, very easy to retake B site, A site on a 5 versus 5. So that's that connector, another setup for you. Short water, 2-on-2, as we mentioned before, very simple. So when we're looking at short water, we mean this area right here. 2-on-2 again, you can do unlimited amount of stuff with this. You can go 2 aggressive, you can have your heaven guy flash over, for example, he can molly this area right here. You can have your rotator player mollying from this area right here, pop flashes which land over here. You can have guys pop flashing from over this angle. There's unlimited ability when taking shot control in a 2-on-2. You could also potentially have, for example, 1 guy going in connector, 1 guy playing here, 1 guy playing in the rotate, and then 2 going aggressive short. That means if the short guys take any contact from people in the tunnel, this guy could throw a smoke, let's say here, and he could peek with them. So you potentially have 3 towards short very, very quickly. So 2-on-2, very, very good. 2-3 again, as we mentioned before. Taking short water with when you have 3 dedicated towards B, you could potentially have 1 here, or all 3 towards short. You could have 2 short and 1 towards B. You could have just 1 taking short and 2 towards monster, for example, or 2 playing passive on site. There's, again, unlimited ability. You don't necessarily have to take map control with the whole team. You could just play more towards a site and obviously just send 1 guy in. So short water, 1-4, again, exact same thing. Another option. Just playing, I would probably recommend this player has to probably take risk here. If he plays passive, you're at risk of potentially getting steamrolled on the site and losing your primary zone. So I would say it could be more beneficial for if you're going for a 1-4 setup more towards B. Have this guy try and do either a 1-and-done position so he at least gets 1 kill, or play the hero. Try and get a couple kills all at once. Playing hyper aggressive, potentially playing in toilets, for example. That's what I would recommend on a setup like that. 1-1-3, having a rotate a heaven. Or jungle, same thing. 1 towards here, 1 towards the rotate, and 3 towards B for the short water. So that means you can dedicate a very, very heavy short water control with the ability for anyone to rotate off here. This guy can assist with flashes. It's very, very easy to take short water control when you have a guy in heaven or a guy jungle with the ability to rotate and the ability to assist with the utility. So moving on, monster 2-on-2 again, as we said. We're looking at another 2-3. So again, 2 players towards A, 3 towards B. You can go for the dedicated all 3 monster. You can have 1 holding short while 2 go. 2 go towards monster. 1 going towards monster with 2 holding back. You could potentially throw flashbangs over. You could nade over the top. There's lots and lots of stuff that you can do with also 2 on the site and 1 going aggressive. 1 to 4 again, and 1 1 3. I don't think there's any need to go through these. They're reoccurring. As you can see, this is basically a mirror image from short to monster. Whatever you can do with your setups for short water, you can also do for monster. And don't be afraid to send 4 players towards B, for example, and have 1 A, and only 1 person go in monster. You could potentially split it, so you could have 1 player going monster, 1 player going short, with 1 player on site assisting short with flashbangs and utility, and the other player monster assisting the monster push with utility. And as soon as these players have taken this control, these 2 players right here can rotate off back towards A. So there's unlimited ability when you mix up your strategies like this. And I don't think many teams do this. They stick to the 2-on-2, or they stick to the 2A, 3B. But there's so many more options. So we're going to quickly go over the defaults, where they're strong, why they're strong, and how they basically counter some of those setups, which I said. So heavy mid. Now, I have mixed this up right here. So heavy connector. So let me just quickly go over this. So this is obviously broader default. We've got 2-2-1, which is heavy A, or sorry, like aggression towards A. You have aggression towards B with this setup. And then obviously a heavy A and heavy B. So let's talk about heavy connector. Again, another setup which isn't necessarily done so much. So you could have 1 A, 1 mid, 1 B. Now, just because you've only got 1 and 1 here, and your main focus is your connector, does not mean these players to just sit there and do nothing. They can easily sneak up long. Let's say you're distracting connector with 3 players. You notice that they're either fighting connector back, or there's potentially aggression on short. So that means that you could potentially have your A player walk up long, while you're distracting connector with lots and lots of noise, lots of people shooting, lots of utility being used. Then your long player can quickly sneak up towards A site and potentially go in towards heaven and get a backstab. So you don't just limit yourself with, our focus is on connector, so let's not do anything on our off default. These players right here are important and they can do stuff. Again, if they're going aggressive short, you could potentially be trying to fight through the connector with your 3 players. And you could have this guy, for example, throw flashbangs over, or he could try and sneak in through monster and come behind through short. There's unlimited ability if you don't limit yourself to focus on what the main part of the default is, which is the connector. If you focus on the opposite end of the spectrum as well, with sort of your 1 and 1 here, you can do a lot of damage. Especially if you get that heavy distraction in connector and the enemies think, oh, there's lots of players connector, so we don't have to focus much on long or on monster, then you could abuse the opponent. So heavy connector, very, very good. It allows for quick rotates towards A and B in the late round. It also, obviously, early, you're able to quickly decide, are they going aggressive A? If so, then let's go and take short control through connector and go towards B. And if they go an aggressive short or aggressive monster, then you can flip that. You could easily go towards A. You pull these players up through connector and take A control. You can have assist flashes here, which land in this area. You can have Molotovs which land here, for example, to remove anyone off cold zero, or the stairs here on banana. Unlimited ability with a 1-3-1. Just not very many people do it. Broader default, 2-1-2. So this is what you're seeing more often at the pro scene. The reason why is because you can focus on short, you can focus on long, you can focus on mid all together. All 3 can be attacked all at the same time, and connector can basically choose what he's doing. So connector could potentially come out short, and monster. So you can attack all 4 areas all at once. So you can have the connector play either take short or the courtyard here, as you're attacking long or as you're attacking monster, or these 2 groups can work together, or these 2 groups can work together, or these guys can go solo, and everyone could go solo in their individual stuff. So 2-1-2, very, very standard. Lots and lots of ability when you do this. Aggressive A. So 2-2-1. Not heavy A, but enough that you can very easily split here. So you could have these 2 focusing long, these 2 focusing mid. You could have this guy split, and then you could come up through connector. You can have an easy rotate towards A and B right here because you have an extra connector. Again, lots and lots of ability. Especially with this easy rotate. very, very good. You can quickly jump through connector with 2 guys and stack into B with 3 attacking opponents very, very quickly. Good default. It's very broad. It allows for a lot of options. It's not as broad as a 2-1-2, for example, but it does allow a couple of options. It allows you to go more heavy towards the A site if needed, and if required, you can rotate back towards B or take short control as you have to in connector. And we'll flip that 1-2-2. So again, it's exactly the opposite of that. So you can very quickly take short control. You can take monster control, no problem at all. This A player, if there's a lot of distractions going on B, and potentially he thinks that there could have been an A rotate, so now there could be 4 on B, then you could, for example, walk up long as the solar player. There's lots and lots of options when you're looking at this type of default. And then we'll talk about heavy A and heavy B. So these are quite simple. So obviously 3-1-1. So your main focus is going to be heavy aggression or potentially a hold into heavy aggression. These are good for if you have some form of strat late game and you want to take heavy map control at the beginning, and you want to, let's say you have a strat which focuses on executing from long, then it would be good to go 3-1-1. Vice versa, if you have a heavy execute which is, let's say, for in either having short control or potentially the entrance to monster in here, then again, having the 3-1-1 towards B would allow you to easily focus on these zones these areas very early in the game, and these players here can slowly work their positions, or if they see an opportunity, they feel like there's a gap in the defense, they can quickly burst and try and get through. So those are the general defaults. I just wanted to sort of skip through them, but the main idea is that me showing you those defaults and sort of explaining some very, very simple stuff should hopefully be like, okay, all my team does is, let's say, a 2-1-2. But how about we try a 3-1-1? Or how about we try a 1-3-1? Or the general goal of me showing these sort of setups is to give more options when you're looking at what do we do? How do we set up our defaults? Instead of just being very standard like every other team and choosing the one option which seems the best, which is either a 2-1-2 or more heavy towards A, then you could have a look at the more controversial options like having 3 towards B as your default and focusing on that as your main part of your map control, etc, etc. So that'll wrap it up for today. Obviously there wasn't a massive amount of information, but hopefully that's allowed you to sort of think, I've got a couple of new ideas about how I can sort of play Overpass, things that I can be more aware of. For example, with if you're playing passive, you have less areas to look at. If you're playing aggressive, you have a lot more areas to look at. When you're taking map control, where's important to look, where's not important to look. If you take X, then where is weak, where's your weakness in your Y. Hopefully you learned a little bit from the primary zones. As I said, to summarize that, 2 out of 4, big rule there. I'll put that obviously in writing. This document, again, I will include in the description when I upload the VOD tomorrow, so if anyone wants to find it, it will be in the description. So you can, if you watch the video back, you can follow along. So that is all I've got for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed that, and that's going to be it for me. Next week will be another map again. So we've done Mirage. As I said, I'm not uploading the VOD for that, the video on demand, because I wasn't happy with it. However, Overpass, this will be a VOD. I'm happy with this, and it will stick to this format from now on. So map overview, zoning, map control, CT setups, and T setups. Those are your typical, that's how it's going to be for the next few weeks. So we might have a Twitter poll or potentially a Discord poll asking for people what they want the next map to be. It's probably going to be Inferno, but I might do a poll. So if you want to take part in the poll, then follow my Twitter, is all I'll say to that. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you have any questions after the stream, feel free to shoot them. Obviously, if you're in Discord, then I can answer them at any time. If you're on YouTube, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult for me to answer. But I'm easily contactable through Twitter. You just have to send me a DM. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate anyone who comes to watch these weekly streams, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next stream. Thanks a lot.